Michigan. 8 days after the blizzard, a deer hunter set out on his usual hunt. Everything seemed normal until he stumbled over something and fell face first into the snow. At first, the hunter thought it was just a fallen branch. But when he looked, again he realized the horrifying truth. Police were immediately called, and they discovered a body almost completely covered by snow. Within an hour, the victim was identified as 19-year-old Christina Castiglioni, who had been missing for 10 days. At first, everyone believed this was just a typical homicide until a deputy at the Livingston County Sheriff's Office noticed a strange connection to another case that had happened 2 years earlier. A couple's black Labrador had discovered the body of teenage girl Kimberly Luiselle curled up in the brush. Both cases shared eerily similar details. Both girls had been raped, strangled, and both were confirmed to have last accepted a ride from a man. Could this really be just a coincidence? 2 deaths 2 years apart, 2 young women discarded in the same place and in the same way. For years, these deaths were nothing more than cold numbers in old files, but now a new clue had surfaced, something that could finally bring the killer into the light, and after 40 years, a secret, long buried within the physical evidence, finally spoke. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated with the latest stories. The hum of old fluorescent lights in Detective Thomas Riley's cold case office did little to dispel the gloom that clung to its walls. A silent witness to decades of unanswered questions. Dust motes danced in the lone shaft of afternoon sun that pierced the grimy window pane, illuminating stacks of file boxes, each a tomb of forgotten hopes. Riley, his face a roadmap of long nights and cold coffee, stared at the faded photographs pinned above his desk. Kimberly Luiselle, then Christina Castiglioni, their young faces forever etched in the sepia tones of the early 80s. 40 years. The truth had eluded them, a predator's shadow stretching across generations, a corrosive acid eating at the heart of Michigan. Riley had inherited these ghosts not just from the files but from the very air of the Livingston County Sheriff's Department. He'd been a rookie when these cases had already grown cold, listening to the weary sighs of older detectives, the frustrated whispers of a serial monster no one could catch now. 25 years into his own career, the faces of Kimberly and Christina felt as personal as family. He knew their dreams, their last known movements, the heart-wrenching pleas of their parents. He knew the anguish that had settled over South Lyon and Redford like a shroud refusing to lift. He was the last bastion of hope for families whose own hopes had long since turned to brittle ash. He looked at his watch. 2:47 p.m. He was expecting a call he'd dreamed of, feared, and meticulously planned for over the last year. Christina's case specifically had received a grant for advanced DNA testing through Season of Justice, a non-profit organization dedicated to breathing life back into forgotten tragedies. The samples, microscopic whispers from a crime scene 4 decades old, had been sent to Othram Inc., a private forensic laboratory in Texas, renowned for its cutting-edge forensic genetic genealogy. It was a long shot, a Hail Mary pass thrown into the vast emptiness of time, but it was the only shot left. The phone, a jolt of discordant sound in the quiet room, shattered the silence. Riley's hand, usually steady, trembled slightly as he picked up the receiver. Detective Riley, the voice on the other end, calm and professional, carried a tremor of its own. "Detective, this is Dr. Anya Sharma from Othram. We have preliminary results on the Castiglioni samples." Riley held his breath, the air in the room suddenly thick, heavy with the ghosts of 40 years. "Go on, doctor. We've successfully developed a comprehensive genealogical profile from the unknown male DNA after extensive work with genealogical databases and family tree websites. We have a strong candidate confirmed by 3 separate family DNA comparison tests." Riley squeezed his eyes shut for a moment, a wave of adrenaline rushing through him, cold and electrifying. "A name. Doctor, do you have a name?" "Yes, detective," Dr. Sharma said, her voice now barely containing a triumphant urgency. "The suspect has been identified as Charles David Shaw." The name Charles David Shaw hung in the air of Detective Riley's office, a chilling echo across 4 decades. But as Dr. Sharma continued to speak, the information initially a jolt settled into Riley's mind. His gaze fell upon Christina Castiglioni's faded photograph, and the office seemed to melt away, replaced by the bitter cold of a Michigan March in 1983. to truly grasp the weight of this newly spoken name. Riley's mind, always meticulous, began to unpack the file of Christina Castiglioni once more, sifting through the layers of time and tragedy. Christina Castiglioni was born on March 8, 1964, a vibrant addition to Cristoforo and Beatrice Castiglioni's home in Redford, Michigan, alongside her elder sister Anna. Christina grew up in a happy household, a stark contrast to the quiet introversion she often displayed. She was known, not for boisterous social gatherings, but for her quiet dedication, her hands often grimy with grease as she lovingly repaired her car. A red Mustang she cherished. Despite her athletic prowess, she excelled in basketball and volleyball at Redford Union. High school she mostly kept to herself, a steady flame rather than a dazzling spark. Yet everyone who knew her agreed. Christina was genuine and kind, a person with a quiet ambition and a rich inner world of hopes and aspirations, a bucket list waiting to be realized by 1983. At 19, she seemed to be living life to its fullest, navigating a steady relationship with her 25-year-old boyfriend, Christopher Lindsay, and embracing a new job as a research clerk at the Detroit Edison Company, but her restless spirit yearned for more, for the wide-open world beyond Michigan. She approached an Army recruiter, made a decision, and began to look forward to a future she would tragically never see. Saturday, March 19th, 1983 was a bitterly cold day. A blanket of unforgiving white stretched across Redford. It was Christina's day off. She spent the morning running errands for her mother, joined by Christopher, their paths diverging around noon with plans for a date. Night later, Christina returned to her parents' home on MacArthur Road around 2 p.m., perhaps taking a nap, resting before the evening's excitement as the sun began its descent, and snowflakes like silent regrets began to gently fall over the town. Christina grew antsy by 7:30 p.m. Christopher hadn't called, impatient. Perhaps a little worried, she decided to go look for him just the week prior. Her cherished red Mustang, a symbol of her independence, had been sold a sacrifice to the relentless cost of insurance now on this treacherous night. Christina set off on foot, her only companion the biting cold and the whispering snow. Her search began across the street at Christopher's sister's place. But he wasn't there. Hope, a fragile thing, carried her a mile further to a friend's house, only to be met with the same absence after watching television with her friend for a while. Perhaps a hollow attempt to delay the inevitable. Christina decided to walk back home sadly. She never made it. The following day, a Sunday, brought an uneasy silence to the Castiglioni home. Beatrice and Cristoforo grew worried, a knot of anxiety tightening in Beatrice's stomach. They rationalized, telling themselves she was probably just enjoying her Sunday, but by noon on March 21st, the rationalizations dissolved into raw fear. Beatrice Castiglioni reported her daughter missing to the Redford Police Department that very evening around 7 p.m. A chilling echo rippled through the Redford police. Several reports came in from nearby Inkster sightings of a partially nude woman being forced into a vehicle. The description, a terrifying match for 19-year-old Christina. Officers began a frantic search in that area. But days bled into an empty, fruitless void. Meanwhile, investigators turned to those closest to Christina. Christopher Lindsay. Her boyfriend was first on their list, and he had quite a story to tell, a story that even then felt like a shield designed to deflect, not to reveal. Christopher claimed he had been delayed by a party around 8 p.m. He and two friends were driving back when he saw Christina standing on the 5-mile roadside near Lola Park, across from Kingsbury Party Store. She was bundled in a burgundy ski jacket, the hood of her gray sweatshirt pulled up against the drizzle. Strangely, chillingly, he did not ask his friends to stop his excuse. Christina disapproved of his two friends, and he didn't want to upset her. Instead, he got out of the car a mile down the road, waiting for her to walk past while his friends bought beers when she never appeared. He said he walked back to the last liquor store to look for her, but there was no trace. Worried, he called her home several times, but never her parents. A decision, he claimed, was to spare them worry. Alarm bells, silent, at first, began to clang in the minds of the investigators. Christina was a disciplined young woman. This wasn't an accidental vanishing. Something terrible, something malevolent had found her. The search continued. Around Redford's wooded areas, photographs of Christina, her gentle smile a stark contrast to the growing horror, were distributed. Tips poured in each one, a fragile thread of hope. only to unravel into nothing desperate. The Redford police even enlisted the help of Penny Mraz, a local self-proclaimed psychic, who suggested Christina's body might be found in a dumpster in Inkster. For days, police, facing criticism, scoured dumpsters and trash containers, but came up empty-handed. Detective John Crete, defending their unconventional methods, stated they were willing to go to any extent that might aid in their investigation or help find the missing girl. No matter how ridiculous it seemed at the time, they were grasping at straws, haunted by a darkness they couldn't name. Then 10 days after Christina Castiglioni vanished into the dark on March 29, 1983, an alarming call reached the Redford police: a man deer hunting in the Oak Grove State Game Area, a desolate wild stretch of land at the corner of Fawcett and Fisher Roads in Livingston County's Deerfield Township, had stumbled upon human remains. Homicide detectives rushed to the scene. The partially clothed body lay in a remote wooded area, evidence suggesting it had been placed there before the heaviest snowfall that occurred around Christina's disappearance. The body, partially covered by several inches of snow, was confirmed to be Christina Castiglioni. By then the snow had begun to melt, revealing the grim truth. Livingston County, usually quiet, had recently become a macabre dumping ground. Between 1978 and 1983, 10 bodies had been found on its state-owned barren land. In nearly all these cases, the victims were murdered elsewhere, their bodies then discarded in the county's remote embrace. These strange circumstances gave birth to a chilling theory: a serial killer amidst the speculation. One thing was horribly certain: Christina had been a victim of heinous crime. Her autopsy revealed she had been sexually assaulted before being strangled to death. The medical examiner discovered unknown male DNA on her body, though DNA technology was then in its infancy. The evidence, a tiny silent witness, was meticulously preserved for future testing. It could not at the time offer detectives a clear direction, but it offered a promise. Detectives remained diligent, running down 80 tips, interviewing at least 20 suspects, even questioning known sex offenders. All were eventually cleared. Intriguingly, investigators found a striking, terrifying similarity to the 1981 unsolved murder of 16-year-old Kimberly Luiselle. The eerie parallels: a young woman assaulted and strangled, her body discarded on state-owned land in the same desolate stretches of Livingston County, sent a cold dread through the investigative ranks. Despite the gut-wrenching belief that the two murders were committed by the same person, nothing definitive could be uncovered. Riley's gaze, still fixed on the faded photographs, now shifted to Kimberly Luiselle's sepia-toned face. The profound, tragic irony settled over him. The connection between Kimberly and Christina, suspected then, had taken 40 years to finally roar to life. Could this one man truly be responsible for both horrors? His mind, now sharpened by Shaw's name, dove into Kimberly's file, searching for echoes, for confirmations, for the truth that had eluded them for so long. Kimberly Sue Luiselle was a bloom of youth, vibrant and full of promise, born on March 3, 1966. Her family had moved from Elkhart, Indiana to Westland, then finally settled in the quieter embrace of South Lyon. When Kim was around 11, she was the third of William and Joanna Louisa's 4 children, a striking brunette whose big brown eyes sparkled with the unburdened joy of adolescence. At 15, standing approximately 5'7" and weighing around 127 pounds. She was a typical teenage girl, outgoing, popular, and brimming with dreams as clear as a summer sky. She excelled in school, earned pocket money babysitting, and often spoke of wanting to be a nurse, a calling that hinted at her kind heart. Her passions were simple and pure: horseback riding, the beach, dancing, and the quiet introspection of writing poetry. Her younger sister, Cindy, 13 at the time, was her shadow, her confidant, a mirror reflecting Kimberly's youthful exuberance as they spent countless hours enjoying these simple pleasures. But summer's light can often give way to autumn's chill. Kimberly's innocence began to fray at the edges when she started dating Robert, or Bob as most knew him. Was a few years older, living in Whitmore Lake. Kimberly's parents, William and Joanna, saw the age difference as a chasm too wide, and their disapproval became a heavy blanket, smothering the nascent romance tension. An unwelcome guest began to reside in the Luiselle home, a subtle discord that altered the normally sunny disposition of their daughter. For Kimberly, Bob was not just a boyfriend, he was a whisper of independence, a step into a world her parents guarded. Then came the blow. One day, Bob delivered the news that cleaved Kimberly's heart in two. He was moving his mother, and two younger brothers were relocating to his cousin's house on Centralia Street in Redford Township for Kimberly. The distance was a new barrier, a cruel twist of fate that threatened to extinguish her first true romance. Determined, she clung to the relationship her young will, forging a path where there was none without a driver's license. Redford, once an unreachable galaxy, became a destination to be conquered by any means necessary. Catching rides or more dangerously hitchhiking school. Once a priority became a convenient alibi, skipped for a day or two at a time, always with the promise of a call home to soothe her worried parents. Wednesday, March 18th, 1981 dawned like any other school day for sophomore Kimberly Luiselle at South Lyon High. But her heart was already elsewhere on Centralia Street. The reasons remain murky. Police later claimed she may have been suspended or dropped out, but her intent was clear. She sought out Cindy at the middle school next door, a plea in her big brown eyes. "Come with me to Bob's house," but Cindy, the dutiful younger sister, declined. Their parents had recently made them promise to stay out of trouble, a vow that unknowingly saved one life and sealed another's fate against her mother's unspoken wishes. Kimberly hitchhiked alone to Redford. A day or two later, the world Kimberly had so desperately chased crumbled entirely. Bob, his voice perhaps, a reluctant instrument of a cruel truth, told her it was over. The parental disapproval, the distance, the lack of a car, and the revelation that he had started dating someone else. Each reason a dagger twisted into her young heart. He left her at his cousin's house, driving off to work, leaving her with only the desolate landscape of a broken dream. It was Friday, March 20th. Kimberly, heartbroken and adrift, decided to head home. Her mother, Joanna, spoke with Bob's cousin on the phone, receiving assurances that Kimberly would be safely seen off with that fragile piece. William and Joanna left for their night shifts. Bob's younger brother, perhaps sensing the vulnerability, walked Kimberly to the corner of 6 Mile in Centralia. There, under the indifferent gaze of the streetlights, a man in a light blue Gremlin with red fenders picked her up. Bob's brother, a flicker of unease stirring within him, noted the license plate number, a thread of caution. In an unfolding tragedy, the man dropped her off at a gas station on the corner of 8 Mile and Merriman. Someone, a fleeting shadow of a witness, confirmed seeing her walking in that area around 6:30 that evening. This then was the last flicker of Kimberly Luiselle alive and walking in the cold Michigan twilight. Her parents returned home around 1:00 a.m. The silence of the house screaming her absence, their frantic call to the Green Oak Township Police Department, was met with a dismissive wave of bureaucratic indifference. She probably just ran away. They were told most runaways come home. William and Joanna insisted, their voices raw with a premonition of terror. Why would she call promising to return if she intended to vanish? But their pleas, like whispers against a hurricane, were swept away. The police saw a typical teenage girl, a typical teenage rebellion. They did not see the brewing storm. The darkness gathering days bled into weeks, each one a fresh wound. Joanna haunted the window, her gaze a desperate prayer, searching for her daughter's familiar stride. William drove the streets, a phantom hunt for a glimpse of Kim with her friends, but found only emptiness. A torrential amount of tears watered the dry ground of their hope. Cindy, watching her parents' agony, felt their agitation ripple. Through the house, the police guardians of safety seemed indifferent. Their assurances that she would show up a cruel mockery. 3 weeks of frustrating, heartbreaking, soul-crushing stress for the entire Luiselle family. Even Bob, perhaps, riddled with a guilt that would follow him, searched endlessly. Then on April 13th, the police finally offered a suggestion. Cold and detached, go on the news, make a public plea. A day later, on April 14th, Cindy and a friend of Kimberly's, driven by a teenage hope, stopped by Bob's new home on 5 Mile and Lasher. Not long after they arrived, police cruisers descended. Cindy, wearing one of Kimberly's shirts, a comfort against a growing dread, confirmed her identity. The officers asked her to wait in another room from the kitchen area. She heard crying, sharp and inconsolable, and then her parents walked in. It was in that moment, in the cold, hard reality of their devastated faces, that Cindy learned Kimberly was murdered. A man and his wife, their dog, their innocent companion, had stumbled upon a horror in the wooded serenity of Island Lake State Recreation Area near Grand River in Kensington Roads. It was Green Oak Township, just 6 miles from Kimberly's home. The state police responded immediately. They found the naked body of Kimberly Luiselle, curled in the fetal position concealed near bushes and trees, a mere 26 feet from a path, 400 yards south of the carpool area. Her autopsy report indicated she had been deceased anywhere from 4 to 6 days. None of her belongings were with her, nor were they ever found. Police believed she was killed somewhere else, then dumped in this desolate, almost poetic resting place. Later that afternoon, Joanna Luiselle, her world utterly shattered, identified her daughter's body. The job of tracing Kimberly's last 3 weeks of puzzle with too many missing pieces now began in earnest. The police knew where she was last seen alive, but who was she with? Where had she been? These questions, like hungry ghosts, began their long haunting of the Luiselle family. The actual date and time of Kimberly's death remained elusive. Her body exposed to the unforgiving cold of a Michigan spring snow still lingering on the ground. The autopsy, a clinical testament to barbarity, revealed she had been repeatedly raped, beaten, and strangled with a belt-like object. There were no signs of malnutrition. A small mercy in a sea of horror. Police, now galvanized by the grim reality, began tracing her movements from Bob's house. Bob's brother, the fleeting guardian of a license plate number, gave them the lead on the gremlin. The man, a casual acquaintance of someone named a person of interest, was interviewed. He claimed not to know Kimberly, only that she was a hitchhiker. He'd picked up at the gas station on 8 Mile, and Merriman Kimberly used the payphone while he went inside. The gas station employee, a fleeting witness, remembered Kimberly getting out of the car, remembered saying to the man, "Looks like your girlfriend's leaving," and the man's chilling reply, "She's just a hitchhiker." I picked up, followed by a casual, disgusting comment about what a nice butt she had. This man was cleared as a suspect, as was Bob. But Cindy, years later, would often wonder, what were the odds that Kimberly ended up back in his car that day? Over 40 years had passed since Kimberly Luiselle, a beautiful, vibrant 15-year-old, was found beaten, sexually assaulted, and strangled to death. Her sister Cindy, now an adult, carrying the weight of a lifelong promise, had embarked on a relentless one-woman campaign to keep Kimberly's story alive, a solitary whisper against the roar of forgetfulness. Riley snapped back to the present, Dr. Sharma's voice filling his ear once more. The pieces clicked into place, the horrifying pattern now illuminated by a single name. Detective Dr. Sharma continued. The DNA profile was developed from samples preserved from Christina Castiglioni's crime scene. It was a complex process. The grant from Season of Justice allowed us to use forensic-grade genome sequencing. From there, our genealogists began building family trees, tracing lineages. It's like finding a single frayed thread in an ancient tapestry and painstakingly reweaving the entire pattern. The metaphor was apt. From a microscopic whisper, a ghost had been given form. Dr. Sharma then laid out the bread crumbs of science, describing how the comprehensive genealogical profile painstakingly built had led them directly to Charles David Shaw. Was there any existing information on Charles David Shaw in any databases? Any criminal record? Riley interjected. The question sharp, urgent. Dr. Sharma confirmed. Yes, detective. Once the genealogical work narrowed down to Shaw, we ran his profile. He had multiple run-ins with law enforcement in Michigan from a young age: Livonia Police Department burglary in 1973, drug possession in 1977. Then in 1981, he was arrested and sentenced to 2 weeks in jail and probation for the attempted kidnapping of a woman in a Fowlerville McDonald's parking lot. And in 1982, arrested again for stealing women's shoes at a Kmart. Riley scribbled furiously. Burglaries, drugs, attempted kidnapping, stealing women's shoes, a history of escalating predatory behavior, yet nothing that had connected him to the horrors in Livingston County. Shaw, it appeared, was a long time Livonia resident, less than 5 miles from where Christina had vanished, but the records showed no direct ties between him and either victim. The connection was purely circumstantial, a terrifying intersection of vulnerability and a predator's dark opportunity. The files, once filled with vague suspicions of a monster, now hummed with the chilling reality of a man. The initial breakthrough, confirmed in February 2nd, 23, was for Christina's case, but the ghost of Kimberly Luiselle still lingered, her case officially unsolved. The lingering question, a silent torment that had haunted Detective Riley and so many before him, now pulsed with a terrifying urgency. Could this one man truly be responsible for both horrors? Detective Dr. Sharma's voice continued, a slight pause betraying the weight of her next revelation. There's one more piece of information. Charles David Shaw died in November 1983, just 8 months after Christina's murder and accidental death caused by sexual asphyxiation. Riley gripped the phone tighter. The air in the office grew suddenly colder, heavy, with the weight of a justice that had slipped through their fingers decades ago. The killer was known but forever untouchable after ending the call with Dr. Sharma. Riley sat for a moment, letting the name settle, the implications wash over him. Then he picked up the phone again, dialing with a renewed sense of purpose. The first call was to Beatrice Castiglioni. Riley braced himself, rehearsing the words of scientific certainty. The decades of anguish that would now find a name. Beatrice's voice, though frail with age, still held the steady warmth he had come to know. From countless interactions over the years, Mrs. Castiglioni. Riley began, his own voice heavy. This is Detective Riley. We have a development in Christina's case. He explained the DNA Othram Inc., the forensic genetic genealogy, the name Charles David. Shaw on the other end, silence stretched a vast echoing chasm. Then a sharp choked sob, not of immediate despair but of a profound shattering release. For 40 years Beatrice had carried a silent scream in her heart. Now it finally had a name. Tears, decades in the making, flowed freely. My Christina. She whispered, her voice thick with a mix of unimaginable relief and unbearable sorrow. We finally have him, but he's gone. The bittersweet truth. A cruel irony settled over her. Her Cristoforo had gone to his grave without this knowledge, but she at last knew her Christina would not be forgotten. In June 2nd, 2023, spurred by the stunning identification of Charles David Shaw in Christina's murder cold case, investigators revisited Kimberly Luiselle's evidence. They had long preserved samples from her crime scene, microscopic remnants that in the 1980s were as indecipherable as ancient hieroglyphs. Now, with the scientific revolution in their hands, they resubmitted those samples for advanced DNA testing. The wait was agonizing each day, stretching like a taut wire. When the results finally came back, they sang the same grim song. A DNA profile matching the unknown male DNA from Kimberly's body was entered into the National DNA Database for Criminal Justice. CODIS. The match was instantaneous, a digital hammer blow against 40 years of silence. The CODA system, an intricate web of genetic fingerprints, returned one name, a name that echoed with freshly revealed malice. Charles David Shaw. The evidence, once fragmented and mute, had found its voice screaming the same perpetrator's name for both brutal crimes. The revelation was seismic. Investigators, their initial suspicions from the 80s tragically validated, worked feverishly, piecing together the final horrifying puzzle. Two young women, 2 years apart, bound by the same monstrous hand, and now finally linked by the irrefutable truth of science. The whispers of a serial killer, long dismissed as mere speculation, now roared with confirmation. The official announcement from Michigan police on September 14th, 2023, was met with a stunned mix of grief, relief, and anger. Charles David Shaw, a name plucked from the obscurity of a grave, was unveiled as the serial predator responsible for the murders of Kimberly Luiselle and Christina Castiglioni, his criminal history, once a series of isolated incidents, now painted a chilling portrait: burglary, drug possession, an attempted kidnapping, stealing women's shoes, a life spiraling into darkness, culminating in the brutal rapes and strangulations of 2 innocent young women. He was a man who, despite his mental illness and complex personal struggles, had actively targeted and destroyed lives, and he had died ignominiously by his own hand decades before his heinous deeds could be brought to light. The revelation swept across Michigan like a cold wind, stirring conversations in diners and quiet living rooms. The public grappled with the bittersweet nature of this justice. The perpetrator would never face a courtroom, never feel the full force of the law, yet the truth so long buried had finally surfaced, an irrefutable testament to science and relentless human dedication. It was a victory hollowed by time, yet still a victory. Detective Riley, exhausted but profoundly changed, looked at the photographs of Kimberly and Christina one last time. Their eyes, once filled with the promise of youth, now held the quiet dignity of answered questions. He thought of Beatrice, her unwavering hope, and Cindy, her lifelong crusade. They had waited, endured, and refused to let their daughters become mere footnotes in forgotten files. This case solved not by a confession or a living arrest, but by the persistent whispers of DNA underscored, a profound truth. Justice may be delayed sometimes by decades, sometimes by death, but it cannot be silenced forever as long as someone remembers, and as long as science continues its relentless march forward. The healing for the Castiglioni and Luiselle families was a journey only just beginning, one that would be forever tinged with the ache of what could have been Christina's parents. Though aging had held on to hope with a fierce grip, Beatrice at least had lived to hear the name, to finally rest with the truth. Cindy, Kimberly's sister, could now tell her sister's story not as an unsolved mystery, but as a testament to a life taken too soon. And a perpetrator finally named the woods of Livingston County, once a silent accomplice. To horror now held a bitter-sweet secret revealed. The long silence was broken. The echoes of the code had finally spoken. Thanks for being here and listening. Don't forget to hit the bell for our latest stories. Stay safe and take care with your loved ones.